Hey guys, welcome back to Your Mindset, Your Power. In the last episode, we talked about limits, not the loud fears we recognize, but the quiet beliefs we rarely question. We explored how many of the limits shaping our lives were never chosen by us. They were learned, inherited, or absorbed over time. And maybe as you listened, something shifted. Maybe a belief you've been calling realistic started to feel less solid. But once a limit is questioned, a new question often shows up. Now what? That's what today's episode is about. And that question, now what, is where most people get stuck. Because what happens next isn't clarity, it's space. Because once a limit is questioned, my friend, something subtle but powerful happens. The old belief doesn't fully hold anymore, but the new way of seeing isn't solid yet either. And this space, right here, is where many people feel uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. You're no longer living inside the old story, but you're not sure what replaces it. And that can feel unsettling, sometimes even scary. Not because anything is wrong, but because certainty is gone. And the truth is, we don't talk enough about this part. We talk about breakthroughs. We talk about clarity. We talk about seeing the truth. But we don't talk about what happens after when the lie breaks and you're left standing in the in between. For some people, it shows like maybe you're realizing you don't actually hate your job. You just outgrew the version of yourself who believed this was all you could do. Or maybe you realize you're not too sensitive. You're just been living inside a story where you learn to stay quiet to keep the peace. Nothing exploded. Nothing dramatic happened. You just can't go back to pretending anymore. And suddenly you're thinking, now what? You might even notice thoughts like, now I don't know who I am. What if I was wrong all along? I can't go back to seeing things the old way, but I don't know how to move forward yet. And if that's you, my friend, I want you to hear this clearly. That discomfort is not a problem. It's a sign that your mind is reorganizing. You're not lost. You're recalibrating. Because for a long time, that limit gave you structure. Even if it was small, even if it was painful. It told you what was possible, what wasn't worth trying, where to stop dreaming. So when that limit loosens, your mind goes quiet for a moment. That's normal. But quiet can feel dangerous when you're used to internal rules. It's a lot like stepping off a moving walkway at the airport. You're still standing, but for a second, your body feels off balance. Nothing is wrong. You're just adjusting to solid ground again. That's why so many people rush to replace the old limit with a new one. Something familiar, something safe. Like telling yourself, maybe I'll think about it later, or I'm not ready yet. Not necessarily as a pause for clarity, but as a way to avoid choosing at all. But this space, right, you are right now, this pause after the belief cracks, is not a mistake, my friend. This is where choice begins. Not forcing action, not having all the answers. Choice. And the most important thing you can do here is not rush to fill the space, but to learn how to stand inside that space. And when you are in that space, that uncomfortable in between place, something very human tends to happen. Because after that limit is questioned, many people don't move forward right away. They hesitate, they pull back, they return to what's familiar. And when that happens, it's easy to think something went wrong, but nothing did. This is what it often looks like in real life. You finally speak up about what you need, and then you soften it, downplay it, tell yourself, it's not that a big of a deal. Or you consider a change you've been wanted for years, and then you delay. Not because you changed your mind, but because staying feels easier than stepping into the unknown. Or you start seeing yourself differently, more capable, more worthy, and then you catch yourself shrinking again, returning to the version of you that feels safer. That doesn't mean you failed. It means your system is adjusting, because for a long time that old limit gave you a sense of safety. Even if it kept you small, even if it cost you anything or something. So when that limit loosens, your mind looks for something solid. And it often reaches backwards. It's a lot like learning to swing without the wall. At first, you keep reaching back to it, not because you can't swim, but because it's where you learned to feel secure. Eventually, you don't need it as much, but you don't let go all at once. And here's the part that matters. Going back to an old pattern doesn't erase the awareness you have gained. No, you can't fully unsee what you have seen. Even when you return to familiar behavior, something inside you knows the old rule isn't the whole truth anymore. That's not failure, my friend. That's transition, and it's powerful. And the work here isn't to force yourself forward or judge yourself for pulling back. It's to notice what's happening and to give yourself permission to move at a pace that feels steady and not rushed. So once a limit softens and you don't rush back to it, another very real question appears. If the old rule no longer guides me, what does then? This is where many people feel unsure. Because for a long time, the limit wasn't just a belief. It was a guide. It quietly told you when to stop, what not to try, how much space you were allowed to take. So when that rule fades, it can feel disorienting, confusing. But here's something important to understand. Living without a limit doesn't mean living without structure. It means your guidance comes from a different place now, not from fear, not from old rules, not from who you used to be, but from awareness. And awareness doesn't shout. It doesn't give you instructions. It shows you what's happening in real time, in the moment. So instead of asking, am I ready? Am I enough? You start noticing something quieter. You notice when you're shrinking, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. You notice when you're choosing out of habit. For example, telling yourself you're not ready to start a business, not because you can't, but because staying where you are feels safer. Or you notice yourself saying, I'm not good at socializing, when what's really underneath is the fear of being seen, not a lack of ability. So you begin to notice when something no longer fits the way it once did. So you can't be blindsided anymore. It's a lot like wearing an old prescription for glasses. You can still see, but everything feels slightly off. Not blurry enough to panic, just uncomfortable enough to know this is not quite right anymore. Nothing is broken. Your vision has simply changed. And that discomfort is not a problem, my friend. It's information. Living without a limit means you start trusting that signal, not forcing action, not proving anything, but stopping automatically living inside something that no longer feels true. And that awareness becomes your new reference point. Not confidence, not certainty, not perfection, simply awareness. And that's enough to guide your next step without pressure. And once awareness becomes your guide, it helps you slow down and take a wider view. A wider view of where you've been, what's shifting, and what no longer fits. So, as we begin to close today, my friend, I want to leave you with this. Once awareness becomes your guide, there is often a quiet pressure to do something, to make a decision, to take a step, to prove that the shift mattered. But awareness doesn't ask for urgency. It asks for honesty. Moving forward without the limit doesn't mean changing everything at once. No, it means making choices that are a little more true than the ones you made before. Something that looks like pausing before saying yes, letting yourself consider an option you used to dismiss automatically, noticing when you are about to shrink and choosing not to. Not because you're confident, not because you're ready, but because you're more aware now. Because awareness is how the old story dissolves. This is where courage actually lives. Not in big leaps, not in certainty, but in choosing awareness over autopilot. In choosing presence and courage over the comfort of what's familiar. And you won't always feel brave. No, my friend, sometimes the bravest thing you will do is simply not go back. Not back into the old story, not back into shrinking, not back into pretending you don't know. And that's enough. You don't need to know where this awareness will take you yet. You don't need a new identity. You don't need a plan. You just need to keep listening to the part of you that feels more honest now. You just need to trust yourself. Because once a limit loosens, it never tightens the same way again. You may brush up against it. You may revisit it, but it no longer gets to decide for you. And that's not a drastic transformation. That's a quiet one, a steady one choice at a time. And if you listen to both episodes, I hope you feel this, my friend. Nothing is being demanded of you. No pressure, no perfection. You're simply learning how to live with more awareness and less automatic limitation, with more compassion and a deeper trust in yourself. And that is real change, my friend. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for listening. And as always, if this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share with someone who might need this awareness today. And remember, your mindset is not just how you think, it's where your power begins. Have an awesome week, my dear friend. Love you guys.